It's 4 p.m.
Hello, Gunther.
Hello there, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Well, it's good. Well, sorry I couldn't make it last few times. Just so many arrangements. And yeah, but now I'm here.
Yeah, that's okay. That happened. That happens. I'm just going to move the computer downstairs, actually. No,
Okay.
I keep it there. I have my little son has come home. Oops. So, yeah. Anyway, it looks like no one else is here yet today. So how have you been?
Well, fine, thanks. So, I had a lot to do, and so I had to pick up my cat from the vet on Friday, and so, but still, I had some ideas regarding our system, and and so far it looks quite promising actually, and we'll see. So, what have you been discussing the last few times?
Well, as Stefan has angrily, in the right kind of anger, commented on the video recording, we discussed documents and so on and settled, well, okay, we looked at EPUBs and so on, but at least for what I'm doing, I have to support EPUB because that's what academia supports, so we can't change the whole workflow. So it's become a question of how can we make a good PDF reader that people actually want to read. We went into discussions of the difference between a book in print and a book digitally. And of course, we all agree a book in print is nicer. But then to design software to read a book digitally, it's a bit useless because most of the good books are copyright protected anyway. So it's been around that really.
We also, because if this was last week, the other thing that was useful that sort of came out of that was the idea of, I can't remember who sort of came up with the thing. And sort of saying it's this thing of actually a lot of us find we like to read on paper but annotate digitally, and we actually talked around. I thought some quite interesting ideas about how you could, a way in which essentially you might say be able to take an image of a book that you annotated manually, and have a digital version of that text, always assuming that leaving aside issues of copyright and things, but that you could so in effect you could have the richness and tactile element of writing in and annotating it on paper medium, but actually transpose it into digital medium where you could do so much more with it. I mean, it's a non-trivial thing, but I think it's a really interesting idea that in a sense, I'm surprised I haven't heard of it more. I mean, I've heard of things where people let you make annotations natively digitally, but even then, what you often end up with is a digital notation tool where it's next to impossible to do anything with those annotations, because the one thing people tend to forget is import-export, and because unless you really are you absolutely are always at the beginning or the end of a use chain, which is less often, I think, than people imagine. Getting stuff in and out becomes a large part of any tool's value, which is, I think, often overlooked.
Kind of regarding that copyright and versioning and all of that stuff, I can't believe I got permission from on high to do a second printing of the book with typos and corrections. It's actually going to take a long time because this guy Kim, who was joining our community, very, very interesting character, he sent me a list of what he had read on the Kindle, on the EPUB version. So all of those he had to kind of manually export. And then now I have to not only manually do it in InDesign, which I needed to get the license for, but because the digital version and the printed version have different needs, I have a master copy for PDF and a master copy for printing.
Ooh.
So every single correction has to be done twice, and I'm not a good detail person, but we'll get through it. But these are weird artifacts of the way things are at the moment. Can you believe you cannot set an InDesign to export with a smaller or larger central margin? Oh, silly.
Well, if you don't mind, I have several questions. So, I mean, I couldn't attend the last few times, and so I'm a bit behind, but nonetheless, I've been doing some thinking, regarding issues of data organization, really. And but before I get into this, first of all, you talked to Stefan about a PDF reader. On the Mac or available on platforms or on the web, maybe?
So that's an interesting question. I'm going to pause recording for a bit because things. Well, okay, I'll talk a little bit and then I'll pause recording. I have to try to keep my business afloat, and that's not easy because developing software, ordinary software, is very, very easy today compared to a few decades ago. APIs and libraries and support and all of that, as you know. I'm talking about developing normal software within the confines, constraints, and paradigms of the people who give you the tools to build with. However, marketing is much worse because we have to live within the Apple or Android ecosystems, have to be in their stores, and they choose what goes in and how it's presented. Advertising on YouTube is quite difficult, and now I'll pause for a bit. Pause, so unpause. There was just some private business stuff that was being discussed there. But anyway, the point is, we as a group can do whatever we want. But I have to support one user group, and it's a student writing a paper for a teacher. That's why it's PDF, because that's what academia wants. PDF, sometimes Word. I would love to support EPUB properly, but there's no point doing it until there's a workflow for it. Even we wouldn't use it, would we? We would design something awesome, but we just wouldn't have any need for it. But the thing.
I mean, that depends. That's all a matter of logistics. Sorry.
Where? That's funny. It's only a matter of logistics. Have you ever been in the military? That's how you win
Well,
or lose
no, but it
wars.
is.
Look, military is logistics. Everything else is a detail. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of history around that. That's both why we're, especially Mark and I are laughing, but anyway.
Yeah. It's that, it's all downhill from there, really. It's very simple.
Just think of Rommel and it's just logistics. We don't need no stinking petrol.
Sorry, Gunther, we're making a joke at your expense without meaning to.
No, it's I mean, it's funny, yes, but yeah, of course, the devil is in the details. But what I mean by logistics is that, of course, I don't see any possibility within the constraints, the resource constraints that we have to to create usable software on all major platforms and having an EPUB or PDF reader. I mean, I know how PDF readers work a bit, so I've a bit experience with interfacing with PDF libraries, and I know the rough edges. But of course, delivering a product that's very difficult. Nonetheless, I mean, what I mean is that there are all kinds of different formats that you probably want to be able to read, to import, and to export to. And since nobody can really do this just in an afternoon, it's the question to me is how you can once you say, well, you have a fairly large community, how you can actually make it happen so that if somebody works on a viewer for a particular format, how that viewer can be actually delivered to clients, for instance. This is what I mean by logistics, but I'm not saying that this is a very easy thing to do. But I just think that it's important to just focus on that issue, because it is true that most of if you do programming and interfacing with other systems, the majority is really just about, do I have the tools and the components that I need to accomplish the task. And this is a question of how you deliver this. And just thinking about the problem this way would be interesting, because it shapes whatever kind of system we are building. So I'm not saying it's easier, but I'm just saying that this is a very important.
I don't think our community should be.
Of it. That means.
Sorry, I started talking over you. The internet connection must have gone.
No, it's okay. So you don't think that?
Just going to say, I just think it's a fun exercise to work on a really elegant reader. I'm not saying our community necessarily should have that as the top thing. What I think would be an absolute killer would be if we look at the community that we're building on the web, that website, and imagine that, but in a more of a graph space. Because finding out what people in your own immediate community are doing, as we've been talking about for a while, that's difficult. And if we manage to do that on the web, it's probably the only web system I would really, really be interested in. Mm-hmm. Like a Webflow, Liquid Space, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
So you can go through those kinds of, that is very, very interesting.
Yeah, that needs a very flexible foundation. So this means that if you just picture that Webflow, and I don't know, you could drag an EPUB into it, for instance, but it can be really anything. It can be any file that you have. And then, of course, the challenge is, I mean, it could be plain text, it could be a data set, whatever you're working on. Mm. And the interesting part is whether there are arrangements in place that make it possible if one community member, I don't know, publishes a view for a specific format or for a specific for a graph, for instance, or for a plot, then and if we were to publish this this view, is it then possible with the arrangements in place that the system actually picks up on this and say, hey, okay, this is a, I don't know, a CSV file, and there are components that can actually help you to make sense of the data. Or it could be also a PDF document, and the system says, okay, that's a PDF document, and I happen to have a viewer that shows you the document. And for instance, there's a JavaScript libraries that work fairly well that I've been looking into. And these views, they don't have to be perfect. So I wouldn't expect in the Webflow to have a full-fledged PDF reader with all the bells and whistles. I think it would be already helpful enough if it were possible that the appropriate views are delivered. And so this is one aspect that I've been thinking about. So, and the only requirement would be that whatever view you provide, given that we are, of course, in the business of connecting data also, that it should be at least possible if that view allowed you to view your whatever your data in more detail, that you can make links and extract things out of this. Could be, for instance, if I have a PDF reader with annotations, could as well say, okay, well, that's an interesting paragraph, or that's an interesting statement. I want to extract this and put this into the data store that we have. And so there are lots and lots of possibilities. Well, in fact, the model that I'm investigating to make this happen is some while ago, Gelernter published a book. No, not a book. Gelernter was working on a system he called live streams. So the idea was that you have a stream of data, and you can view that stream, so you can trace it back. So it's ordered by time and see, oh, okay, what have I been working on yesterday, and so forth. And of course, this model can be extended. You could say, okay, I want to fetch certain items of a particular type from that bucket that we are all sharing. And of course, then we can have annotations and links. And I don't think it is very difficult to build. And in fact, I am working on some concepts and to make this happen. What of course I can't do is that because when building manipulation software is very difficult, interactive systems. So you spend a huge time with minor details. So think about the PDF reader, or even a drawing application can get very, very complicated. But it seemed to me what would be very useful is that, because I always get annoyed when I organize my notes and all kinds of artifacts, is that what I always do is I throw all things into one bucket, into one folder. And because, as we know, because no matter which scheme you come up with, it always breaks down, and then you end up looking for stuff on your file system. And same thing is with my notes of a very simplistic note-keeping application, and that I intend to build on top of this data network, which should be a replacement for the file system. And it would be very interesting, because then we could have these streams of items, let's call them items, and we could ask interesting questions. For instance, what have I been working on the last few days? Or I could filter by user and say, what is it that you have been working on? And so we would have essentially various filters in place that just allow you to retrieve the items again. And I think this could really work, and you could also then, of course, think about this bucket. Can also say, well, I'm working on a new component for the web, for instance, or I've bundled up a PDF reader, and I'll put this into that stream, and other people or clients can pick up on it and say, oh, okay, are there any new components? And then these could be integrated into the Webflow. So that's the general idea. And what I'm doing now is that I'm just making the simplest possible version of this, which is just a collection of notepads that I have in a browser, and then we will see what we really need, because of course you also want to link items, but then the questions, what types of links do we want, and so forth, and things can get very complicated. So I just suggest that I'll scale up this small demo that I'm already having, and so that other people can contribute, can store their items into that system, and then I think we time to figure out what is really helpful for us. So it's just
Sorry.
it's just the so you could also have text. So if we had to-do lists, for instance, this could be items too, and you could say, well, what has been done in the system, or what are there still open tasks. Could have a tagging system in place, and so I will construct a very small version of this. And of course, later on, we can also think about distribution, so that everybody has his own bucket of items which can be interlinked, but or replicated even. But the key idea also is that that this is a continuous stream. So whenever there is so you don't change anything directly, you don't change the item, so you just add in append more facts and links too, which would be items as well. And so that would be the general model. And then people can experiment. They can say, well, I don't like I want to build a new tool, a new view, and this view doesn't have isn't required to necessarily to run on the web. Could be also a one-shot desktop application, even for one person. Stefan does this a lot. So he builds his own tools, which are very useful to him, perhaps not so useful to me. And the same situation, I'm also in the same situation. So I actually build lots and lots of tools that are not products, but they are very simplistic, but they do the job. And if it were possible to integrate all these different kinds of views or applications over that data network, then I think we would be already in a much better place, in a much better position. And so, yes, so I hope this wasn't too long-winded, but this is what I've been thinking about.
That was a lot, very much worthwhile. I think we need to, as a group, because it's amazing what you're working on from what I've seen and what we discussed, but kind of decide on a use case. You know, we've been talking for a while in different directions, but one of them that I personally really think is exciting is this space where we put down who we are and what's going on. So you could easily use this space to get updated on a team. Is that, Gunter, one of your primary use cases?
Well, yeah, you know, the primary use case is more retrieval, so and facilitating recall. So meaning that you have several nodes. Yes, so I have several nodes here, and this is just from a system, and I don't know where to put them really. But the primary use case would be just to have a system that allows you to organize all your nodes, and they could be also appointments or schedules. It doesn't really matter. You just put them into that system, and what it should help you is to retrieve the most relevant items. where relevance is, of course, something that you define. So you would interact with the system by saying, well, for instance, I don't know, what have I been working on last week, or is there anything that or which items do I access most frequently? And you could have
So
all
you're
kinds
talking
of,
about a
of
productivity
queries in
space,
place.
a productivity thinking space, like notional Rome to an extent, but maybe simpler nodes, a bit more analysis or something, right?
Yeah, analysis retrieval. So because it's a question of core principles. And one of the core principles or affordances, whatever you want to call it, is that in any kind of system, you have to optimize I call it data acquisition. So because there are lots of stuff that we have to think about in whatever goals and work we are pursuing, and often it's quite a pain to just get the stuff into a computer system, and this phase needs to be accelerated. I think that's very important. I'll give you a simple example what I mean. So because let's say that you have your computer and there's no software installed, and let's say there's even a web browser. There's not really much you can do with it. So what do you have? The file system, for instance. So you could use the file system to collect your notes. Yeah, but then how do you do it? So you have to create a file. You have to think about a name for the file. And then you have to think about a place for the file. So which folder does it have? And eventually you'll give up and you have this one large text file where you put everything into the text file, and maybe you have a drawing. And that's I find this is quite annoying, and it stops me effectively from transferring my notes to computer system. But with the very simple, it's too trivial to show, notepad application that I have, where I can visually arrange my notes, and each notepad is you just enter some text, and these are just lists, but it's already helpful enough. And when I have this affordance, it's not so stressful anymore, because you think, okay, here is something that I have to keep track of. Well, I just open a new notepad, maybe use an existing one and type in whatever I'm thinking, and then off I go with my work. And with a traditional system or with databases, with all solutions that are surrounding data organization, that's often very, very cumbersome. And the idea is just to facilitate this. Of course, then ideally that system should be used to expand itself, to say, well, what are our most important topics of investigations? There'd be nothing wrong if you put in some links, for instance.
Right. We're kind of going far down into a rabbit hole. So you're talking about a personal knowledge management system, right? Kind of.
Well, maybe, but I don't want to put a label on it. So it's.
No. I'm sorry. I don't mean to put a label. It's just, like, so everybody kind of feeds in on what's going on.
No, but it should be also possible to do authoring. So what I'm talking about is just a hypertext system, meaning that that there's nothing would prevent you to collect paragraphs, for instance. And of course, if you had tools in place that can make rearrangements and compositions of items, well, then you immediately have a system that can produce documents. And the methods to produce the documents, the components, they would be, of course, in the space too. And so by conception, it isn't bound to confined to any particular workflow, much less zigzag, for instance, is bound to a particular workflow. So so that's just the basic idea to get the structure erected, and then build whatever kind of functionality you want. You could also have, I don't know, a component that does a visual meta export. and combine this component to whatever items you wish. So it's really more of an information system.
You basically want to build a whole environment, and is no bad thing. An environment where you can, because it is one of the things that we lack. We lack a place to put notes and find them.
Yeah.
Basically the finding. Can I do a quick screen share just to show you? Okay. I hope the rest of you don't mind either. So this is what I've been working on for the last few days. It's exactly the same thing, but in much smaller scope. That's a weird sentence anyway. So the thing is, two different things. How can you write down textual thoughts and have references to things and then find them again when you're writing? Remember, we all have different use cases. Mine is a student filling in a paper. So combine reference management with note-taking and making it easy to find. Forget the name, I just can't think of a better one. So the point is, when you're in a reading environment, you do a keyboard shortcut. I happen to use Command L, because in a browser, you load the location, one of the few left, and it takes that text, goes into your authoring environment, but in a special document. So this is author. It is a normal author document, but it's in a special save spot. And when you want, you can just click to paste that citation. That is the only thing. And you do Command L and you go back to wherever you were. And then when you're in author, you can find add or cite. So for instance, you do Command L, and then you have this with all the author functionality. The reason I'm mentioning it regarding what you're doing is that in this, you can now instantly select any keyword, do Command F to see all the occurrences. You can also click on a citation to copy citation. So this could be a reference management. And because it is plain text, you can also have headings and not headings. You can move things around, do whatever you want, like in a notebook, just digital. And of course, you have a dynamic view on the other side if you want it.
How many of those in that sort of model you're just showing there, how many of those things you'd clipped, is everything, including the heading, a reference? And how would you know what's a reference and what isn't?
That's a really good question. I've been looking at that in different ways. Probably the way it would show would be one style. For instance, here the text is in quotes and then bracket author name, author date. This may be better to put it as a block quote, so it's more separate. But if you show this to Alan Kay, the first thing he would say is it all needs to be special units, not just flowing together text. And I think that's where good turn. Yeah, I can see you shaking your head in agreement. Yeah, that's where we differ.
Exactly. Yes, but of course, differ. It's just a matter of the technical foundation. I mean, if you had these discrete units, I mean, of course, you could compose a coherent document, an larger document that you have just shown, and have the features in place. And difference would be just that you had a higher resolution address space, but how you deliver these items that you collect, how you consolidate them, and how you package them into a view, such as the one that you've shown me, well, that's really the matter of the software interacting with the system. So I think so of course the sections they would be perhaps individual items, but they don't have to be. I mean, you could also I have this huge chunk, this huge document, and there could be inside that space a heuristic that that tries to chunk these text into items. That's possible too, which gives you another string. So it's more about finding a general and useful data structure that can accommodate a wide variety of use cases. And for now, I've just considered my use cases, and it is similar to. I think it's very much in the spirit to what Ted Nelson has been trying to do and is doing with his Xanadu system and later on with Zigzag. It's just my interpretation of it based on my needs and and desires when it comes to computing and organization. So the only trick is really to have is to is to do it properly in the first place. Later on, you'll have
almost as flexible as pen and paper, but with computer magic, right? Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Peter, you had something?
Yeah, I was wondering, do we have a way to make and name discontinuous selections? So say I want to grab one sentence from one paragraph, then 2 pages later, I want to grab another thing. I want to take them both together as a selection and give them a name and then be able to reference that later on.
Some programming environments have multiple selections, but I don't know about just a text environment for working on it.
I'm thinking of potential functionality for author down the road.
I think that's an interesting idea, groupings, views, and addressability.
Well, funny enough, that's one thing I was also thinking about, in this case, looking at it after it's gone into your special document, is in a sense of, so you maybe over time have made a number of annotations for the same source, and they may be in different places in the document. And then, for instance, you realize that actually the annotation quality, the citation information quality has varied. I mean, this is one of the things actually that you have reference managers for, because, probably the first reference you got often is not particularly good because you knew better, and they actually found that the thing you were referring to, its real canonical reference is somewhere else. So there's an interesting thing there where you may want to sort of basically retie all the things together, regardless of whether they're contiguous within this annotation document, and just say, all right, all the things from XYZ 2007, just want to make sure they're all referencing the right thing, which might include actually putting in additional detail.
Yeah. I mean, you and me, Mark, just to make it clear for everyone, have very different ideas of what a citation is. You want them to be pristine. As long as they can allow you to find the stuff that they were referencing, I'm happy. And so that's why I think it's a useful dialogue that we don't always agree, because you're saying that's not the original actual part of that quote. And,
oh, no.
No, hang on. That's really important to be able to trace that. Right. So, yeah.
I was meaning more. No, it's more the problem of really what started all this, certainly in terms of the visual meta aspect, was sort of finding the right source. So I don't mean that you're quoting the content of it correctly. It's more that when somebody else reading it follows the information I've given, that they actually get realistically close, if not to the thing that I wanted to point them to. Because so much citation is frankly really poor. No one's really encouraged to do it. It's much talked about, little done. Somebody might complain if you put a paper in, they might say they don't like the references, but there aren't many people who actually sort of look into the detail or open them up and find that they just don't work. And I'm not talking about people who are deliberately doing bad things, but just people who've taken something from one place, put it in another, and it's never been sort of dereferenced and re-referenced so that we know that what we're passing along. And I was just thinking about, how one will be able to address that. So in other words, you find some stuff you referenced, that the citation information that is attached to it. So on where you have your dialogue that pins around, it's in other words, how do I go and find all the things that in the document that go back to that same source thing, paper, book, call it what you will, and just make sure that they're all actually, they all reference to the same thing, because I might have done this in different sessions. And that maybe because I've done it over time, that some of the earlier ones, perhaps the citation information wasn't that good, and I just want to make sure that they're all in sync. That was what I was thinking of.
I know. So this thing of building this kind of a space, is this something we're all share a level of interest in?
Definitely. Or at least speaking for myself, definitely.
Raphael, you seem to be smiling or something.
Yeah, well, I think these environments have a lot of potential, and to be honest, there isn't a single app out there that I've been using and I've been extremely happy with it. The last one, the one that I still use, where I keep most of my notes and things, is IA Writer. And it's a nice environment because it lets you do transclusion within the files. So if you have a multi-part file, when you change, the source, it changes all of the other locations for it. But I would love to have a lot more, not freedom, but more information extraction from the documents that I'm working on. And right now, it seems there's a tendency where the simpler it is, the best it is, but then you lose all of the advanced features. I would like it to be separate environments, right? It's a simple place for you to write and to read, but whenever you need the extra tools, there's a place you can go to have all of the other things. But that's how I feel related to like a text environment. So Gunter's presentation was the one you showed a couple meetings ago, right, Frode? That open environment where you could add text and manipulate it. That's really cool. I mean, I feel like it looks like a mural board, but focused on text. That's the feeling I got when I saw it. Connected with your idea in your app, where you can start typing in the ideas, connecting them, going into them, filling out the text, and organizing it in a visual way. What I like the most is organizing it in a visual way. If I can show you, like in my table, I always have like these different cards and papers that I can organize things visually. So if I can continue that work on a screen with the potential that the digital world provides, it would be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all here in this group and the wider community, we want better ways to put down a thought and then organize it and find it later, and whether that's thoughts connected to a source or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it is quite amazing that does not exist. It exists for some users. Clearly, Rome and Notion are doing it fantastically for that particular kind of user set.
Yes.
The problem I've had design-wise lately is something simple as a student reading to write a paper. If they come across something interesting, should they make the note in the document or in a notebook? So what I'm trying to design now is both. So when you read a document, actually, I'll show you real quick because I think it's kind of relevant to this. Hang on. This is me trying to design really, really simple to save implementation money, but I think simple is not necessarily a bad idea. So when you're reading a document, you flip the document. And on the back, all you got is 3 things. You can put a folder, you can put the document in a virtual folder, but of course, only in one folder. It's optional. But you can add as many tags as you want. Because of course, tags are great, they're flexible, but folders have a different kind of need. And then at the bottom, you're allowed to write a little textual note about the document, but it's not that useful because when you then go in Reader to find a document, this is all you get. I'm just going to make you guys smaller. So you can choose folders on the left, all your content. This is only for documents, by the way. And on the right, you have the tags. And the tags work inside a folder. So let's say you click on a folder on the left. Let me see. So we have here, we clicked on literature review quotes. That constrains the central list. And then on the right, if you choose to click on a tag, only what is tagged with that is shown inside that folder, not globally.
And I take it, it's also, judging by the way it's showing, that, for instance, in this case, of the stuff you've selected, only the 3 of the tags are pertinent out of the overall tag set.
No. Yeah, well, maybe. Let me just say that back. I'm not sure if I understood you. In this case, I mean, obviously just a random mock-up, but it's only showing what's in literature review quote folder, which also have either or author, Doggett 50, and Engelbart tags.
Yeah, and but not the other ones because they're not shown. Yeah,
exactly. And also you can see there's one grayed out here where it didn't have visual meta. So it's grayed out. It's showing, it would be showing the name of the document, but not the title of the document. So the user can deal with it. But the reason I'm saying it at this point in our conversation is that when you get to a point here, that's enough to find it on the bookshelf. That's what all this is supposed to be. So the idea is you double click to open the document, then you can fold it and look at notes and look at whatever you want. And then you go to the next step.
Here's a crazy thought. Has anyone ever sold a pack of Post-its that were pre-printed with QR codes so that I could peel off the top Post-it, slap it on the inside of a book, and then zap that with my iPad and have an automatic record created? Then whenever I go to that book again, I could just zap that QR code again, and I'm back to the record of all of my notes for that particular book.
So how do you then tell the system that this QR code relates to this book?
I did some research on the QR codes, and they have something called dynamic linking. Basically, how it works is that they create a static link, and then it just redirects to the new link when you change the address for it. So a QR code can be any address, but then the system reallocates that to a new address. But
yeah, I mean, technically, yes. But I mean, interface-wise, I guess you scan the book on the first use of the book or something?
Yeah, or you just like
a page
imagine
number.
you slap the QR code on the back page where there's an ISBN. I think image recognition is good enough to be able to pluck out, just do an OCR of the text on the back cover. The ISBN pattern is easy enough for a simple regex to be able to pull it out. Then have a little scripting in the background to run off, look it up in Google Scholar and pull in all the related information for you.
I mean, I like that in theory. I have to say my experience is always different. I've been surprised at, you know, in things where I've wanted to use them for published work, how many of those assumptions that you just stated, which I sort of agree with in principle, I found actually sort of work badly, which isn't to speak against this. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea. The issue is that using things like ISBN, you know, you find for every book where it's just absolutely clear, there are just as many where it's got a whole slew of codes. They're not, you know, the publisher doesn't really care. And the book you're trying to sort of get back to is you know, hard to find. It's a bit like music and cover art, you know, or with all this computer cleverness. Have you ever tried one of those things that you put your music in and ask it to go and find the cover art, and you never get the album art you expected? But I mean, that's not important, except it exemplifies the same problem. So what are you referencing? I take Freud's point exactly, that it's got to just be good enough to find the right thing. What I'm sort of relaying back is my slightly depressing experience has been that I actually need a lot more than I thought to get the right thing. You know, there's a number of times I've taken something that seemed to be complete, but doesn't lead me anywhere useful.
Yeah, however, Mark, I agree with every single point. However, then you also have the issue that most English sentences are actually unique. So I don't think you need the QR code. If you take a picture of a page of a book, OCR some of that, do a Google book search, chances are you'll find the book. Mark, you want to do a test? Pull a book behind you and type a sentence.
I won't.
Sorry, you're the one with books behind you.
So I'm not going to pick one of Ted's books. Oh, we'll just pick something out.
Yeah, and then open random page.
Random page. Okay. Yep.
And find a sentence and type it in.
Into
Google search.
Google search. Okay, bear with me just a second.
You may want to do quotes around it. I don't know.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, definitely quotes.
Yeah, otherwise you just get the whole internet back.
Whatever happened to that Google project where they scanned a bunch of books, but then they had to lock it behind this mega firewall?
Yeah.
Well, that's part of Project Gutenberg, wasn't it? That then got derailed by copyright.
Yeah, because I mean, when Google were like, yeah, we're just scanning a bunch of books for humankind, but then they wanted to start charging for it. So then they said no, and then they got blocked.
Because if what Mark is doing now works, if you highlight something in a book, take a picture of it, it shouldn't be that hard for the software to find that book in your Kindle library or whatever you dedicate. And then when it opens that book, it does a search for that text, and that's how it finds that section.
Yeah, no, it's found this. Then again, it uses some acronyms that I'd never seen before, so it is pretty unique.
It's crazy, right?
But I mean, this is, in fairness, this is a book that has been digitally printed and is probably digitally native in source. So I'd probably picked a bad. No, I didn't. I picked a good example, which shows your point holds true. But of course, for anything that goes back a few years, that's not necessarily the case. You know, once you're back into stuff that's just been scanned in from old print.
The person who actually demonstrated this to me, I got a phone call many years ago from a guy called Martin King. He invented T9 texting. In the call, he said, grab a random book, type in a sentence. No, he didn't do it that way. He typed it in, that I just spoke it to him. So he pretended to have this big fancy system, and then immediately told me, just did a Google search. He said, is this your book? So at least if you have a couple of sentences on a page, it's scanned, there is some magic in the cloud that'll find it. It's quite magic.
No, sorry, no, I didn't mean to. I'm not dissenting from that notion at all. But it's in the issue in thinking it, especially in the terms of the student, is as long as they're aware that that system is incomplete, and sometimes they'll need to do some legwork. The danger is that computer says no, or rather, the point computer says yes when it actually means no, but it doesn't know how to tell you because it gives you the only answer it's got.
Mark, that goes with any addressing. It's like saying, can you go down to Tesco? It's 3 streets down and you take a left by the yellow house. I need something that's on the 4th shelf from the back. You know, the addressing as an issue needs some level of understanding and maturity.
No, again, I understand that, but you know, the chance of going to the wrong shop for your tin of beans or something is less than actually finding, quite often taking, you know, following through references and finding the thing at the end of the line is not at all what you thought it was. But I take the point. Anyway, interesting to experiment more with.
We have this on a monthly basis, so let's not go into it too much.
It just worked for me. I did one in English and one in Portuguese, and it worked.
It's crazy,
like
isn't
the first result.
Crazy.
Yeah, very strange.
What I'd like to find out is who was it that got us starting abbreviating first names of authors and citations. It is so maddening when I get, you know, P. Smith, J. Chen. I mean, come on, how many Chens are there on the planet?
Yeah.
Don't even get me started with acronyms. I can't stand acronyms. I hate them so much.
Oh, I see Alan has joined us. Alan, how long have you been here? You were below the fold in my Zoom list of people.
I just joined. I realize there's probably only 4 minutes left. Apologies. But if we're talking about the struggles of attaching entities to surface name pointers rather than what they represent, aka acronyms and abbreviations, I'm all in. It's a huge problem. I've been working on some ways around that, but go ahead.
No, please. What have you been working on around that?
Well, one of the angles is similar to what Ian's working on with Codex, but not necessarily sticking just to standoff properties, is examining the problem of anchor tags going to actual entities. In the context of Rome, there's a way, you know, like I'd be interested in across the board a standard for establishing this is an alias for this, or this is a part of a group, or in fact, I'd love to chat with any of you around fleshing out what a standard might look like, but it starts to get pretty complicated within like 5 minutes, right? Because you might want to say, this is related to this, but there's something in between that I don't know about. So I only want this to come up with this if a certain variable is met, right? So a grandchildren kind of connection. And the whole idea is that you would, we have context that we create moats around, and those moats are the words that are used. And we each have personal sort of moats, but wow, I wasn't prepared to jump right into this. Sorry, it's probably not making a lot of sense. I'll revisit. I didn't want to jump right in and take over.
I think it would be really worthwhile if we schedule for you to actually present on this, because it's a different aspect to the kind of addressing we've been talking about. And I think, I know I would be hugely interested. I'm guessing the rest of you would as well.
Yeah.
A lot of head movement there.
That'd be great. Yeah, I would love to see it in your products. I think author and just all three are a really good place for this sort of approach as a way to create annotations that you can find later on. But I'm also just genuinely interested in what you've been working on lately with author and your other tools, because the note taking plus the mind mapping is pretty intriguing.
Thank you. It's very nice to hear you say that rather than see you write it, which was also very nice. But the thing is, the kind of things we've been going around in the community here is finding out the design, as in the appropriateness of things. I've had a problem with the dynamic view in author going in all kinds of directions. And then I always land on the same thing. It's not actually really a mind map. It is a document map. You know, we have to use the language for people who have heard the language. And, you know, Gunther earlier, I called what he was working on like a personal productivity space, and he almost exploded at me in his very kind way. Because it is not just that. So to look at the what we're really trying to do, what we are trying to do here as a community, is to go back to the 50s and reinvent stuff, while also keeping in mind real infrastructures. So, you know, where is it appropriate to have a graphy space? Not everywhere. And it's so intriguing, an ocean, but it gets quickly messy. So that when you're talking about not just a connection between two things, but having stuff make that something else, this is hugely interesting.
Great. Yeah, it's funny. I was just writing about this, and you know, I think it's pretty commonly recognized how our minds jump to up and down the ladder of abstraction as we're composing or thinking around topics. But we leave it at that. We just say we jump around. If it turns out that there are sort of patterns in how we jump, then we could have a much more useful tool. I'll try this out. I haven't really spoken this out, but instead of just an outline, imagine an outline that's also sort of a turnstile. That there's outlines at each of the stems of the turnstile, but they are referring to kind of different domains of the same document. So one of them might be an actual breakdown of the content into its portions, but another stem of the turnstile could be questioning your analytical process on this document. And you don't necessarily want that to fit within the same outline, you don't want it to fit within the same narrative, but it is essential to your thinking process, you know? Anyway, so go ahead.
That's really phenomenal. So this sounds like it's off topic, but it's not. I have a trainer. COVID days, we use FaceTime video, and it's all very nice. She tells me to jump up and down. I jump up and down. I'm not going to do it if someone doesn't tell me to. So I've now started trying in my old age to do morning routines. So we had this idea of filming that, you know, me as a general client would film doing whatever, send it to her. And then whoever does it for a month or whatever gets half off, something like that, some kind of an incentive. But the point is, she wouldn't sit and watch the whole gosh darn boring, you know, old sweaty man doing things, but she would be able to go in and check, right? So from what you're saying with the turnstile, because it's provocatively interesting, imagine if when you're working on a document, it records absolutely everything you do, the system. because you talked about analytical process. So if you then have a student-teacher relationship where the teacher can somehow rewind your analytical thinking, and not do the whole thing, because who has time? But if that was a valid logical thread, they should be able to jump back and say, you did a Google search right here. Why? Blah, 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 blah. And you wrote this and you changed this, but the analysis I've run on this system, that makes no sense, etc. So to provide these different threads generated in different ways for analysis in different ways is hugely interesting.
It sort of goes deeper, and this is actually something I sort of was picking up on, my thesis stuff was beginning to surface the way in which we make these leaps up and down the ladder, as Alan referred to it, which I recognize that behavior, because we seem to have a big gulf. On one hand, we have the endless promise of AI that always comes up slightly short because it doesn't think like a human. And we have humans who do amazing sort of things, but we don't know. Well, in our hubris, we expect the AI to just go and figure it out by throwing enough stuff at it. But if we, I think it throws back on us too to develop acquire the habit of externalizing some of the things, even if only to say, I'm just seem to be making a random jump at this point. Even just surfacing, say, I don't know what the link is, but I'm making a jump. Even just surfacing that again is quite useful. And so what I'm reflecting back on here is, yes, ways in which we encourage ourselves to undertake that sort of behavior and annotate it, because some of it, yes, can be recorded, but some of it, I think, it falls back on us. Garbage in, garbage out. If we put helpful stuff in there, we may get some more helpful stuff out.
That I attempted to share something I just put together yesterday. If there's any interest, it has really just as a point of conversation. It may be off topic. It's not what I was talking about so much before, but it's an attempt to define how I think, how we might think when approaching a topic.
Sure, we have some more time, I think.
Yeah, okay, I'll be very quick about it.
But do you want to do a screen share?
Yeah, I'll do a screen share.
That's
let me just find the right one. Yeah, here it is.
By the way, while you're doing that, I see you have the space shuttle poster in the background. All of you are watching All Mankind on Apple TV, right?
No.
Fantastic series, I shall say. No.
Really? Okay, thank you. I'm gonna check it out. All right, so this should be it. So as just
everyone, should we stay till 1:15 today? Can we do that?
I can.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Are you using Scapple?
I am, yes.
Wonderfully flexible tool.
It's wonderful. Really helps me think, and I wind up, what I'm doing lately is I'll start out maybe writing in here, and it'll go all over the place, and then this will be a process of the composition that might go on the whiteboard, and eventually it's like I almost have to use different tools in order to get it to something that is, makes sense, has a narrative. But in this case, I started with the term thinking around HTML, and I just wanted to record kind of my process. And what I found is that before I could even, this means something to me, but before even getting to outcome-based, anything remotely resembling an article or an artifact that's public-facing, I wind up going backwards, right? To say like, what does that mean, right? And so I do a breakdown of the two terms, because thinking around is a pretty loaded concept. So I pursue that. And then I also, HTML is a pretty loaded concept. And so even in the thinking around branch, I come up with a concrete example. And then I wind up coming up with skeptical comments as if there's an outsider saying, what good is this? What use is this? And then there's the acronyms that I'm saying different questions, but they're really the same thing. And then there's a synthesis that comes back down at some point after I've explored HTML and what it can mean in my sense and what it doesn't mean and what thinking around means. They come back together, you know, and that leads to oftentimes totally off tangent thoughts that I may want to come back to, or jobs to be done, which is a tool to help me think about the rest of this. And so it becomes this process. And I find that even before I get to actually answering or the question, I'm still just working on the rules of the game, if you will. This is all, you know, a priori, Michael, or interior, you know, just working it out. But some of this stuff becomes material that will be actually critical to explaining, you know, the topic, right? That when I say HTML, I don't mean JSON, I don't mean PHP or React, I mean a thing that relies on digital hosted distributed system, a method to click and activate, and names, right? And I don't mean to go into the topic here, but just that was an early attempt at saying, like, are there patterns to that jumping around? That's about it.
So Gunther, this is clearly related to the kind of environment you're working on, right? So I have to ask, having seen that and identifying with it obviously very much, what kind of an end product do you want from that? Is this to do that horrible word called, you know, sense making, or is it to produce a presentation or a document, or why are you doing this?
Great question. This is specifically as an attempt to organize my thinking under some fundamental motivation, because I've written a lot of things personally that go off in different directions, like how the outline is a great format and yet it has its limitations. How the 2x2 is a great format and it has its limitations. Tagging, great, limits, anchors. And this was an attempt to say, okay, what's actually underneath all this? What's my struggle here? And ideally that would come out as kind of like an explainer website where I could not necessarily present a solution. I'm not as interested in solutions at the moment as I am saying, what would another kind of HTML be like? And I think the very first example of that would be Project Xanadu, which wouldn't have been possible back then. From a product manager's perspective, it's a nightmare because it has to come out fully formed, right? And HTML is brilliant because it could go from 0 to 1. But now that we're here in this new space, is there some other way to evolve beyond the specific tagging to you know, particulars, which I find to create problems. I don't have evidence of this, but I almost think it can create problems in journalism and create problems in our whole national conversation, because you can't anchor tags work like telescopes or microscopes in that they focus your attention, but they don't help with your awareness.
That's a very interesting perspective. In my thinking about this for the last few decades, a lot of it has been going back to basics as much as I possibly can. And that means how the little brain works. But then over the last 2 days, YouTube has recommended weird visualizations of atoms and proteins and all of that stuff. I mean, there's 280 million hemoglobin molecules in one blood cell, that kind of stuff. And I'm just thinking, with the richness of what you're talking, you know, when you have proteins doing a job of, you know, changing the concentration of electrons here versus there, when you see all these visualizations, they are three-dimensional shapes working in time. Maybe we can actually learn from that, because there's got to be something in us that can relate to richer structures than running around in the jungle. Most of the stuff we're talking about is running around in the jungle. There's an apple over there. You know, can we somehow modify our thinking to be rich to the kind of, to be able to do the kind of explorations you're talking about?
Are you familiar with anamorphic sculptures?
Yeah. But please talk about them in this context.
So there are sculptures where if you look at it from one angle, you see, say, an elephant, but as you walk around, the elephant turns into a giraffe because it's a three-dimensional wire sculpture. And I think about that in terms of our graphs today and how much more I'd like. Well, honestly, I'd prefer something more like not notation, not theory than graphs. That's for another. But you could imagine you have this set of associations. From one perspective, it looks like a giraffe, where it's like, in this sense, you know, how does HTML, how did it work in the 80s and 90s, rather 90s? And then as if you could imagine you had an XY axis on a graph, and as you started to turn your frame of reference, points disappeared and other points came to the forefront. And they were all still kind of there. You're just moving around the graph. What that would provide is, you know, today the problem with graphs is that they're almost pointless because there's so much noise.
Mhm.
So that sort of turnstile idea would almost apply to a graph view, where it says, here are the three main points if I'm thinking about this from an outcome perspective, you know. But if I'm applying this to previous projects, I twist it around and now things go away and I discover new associations. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's very zigzag-like. You know,
Yeah, it's also very, it rings a bell to conversation. I mean, having the sort of tinderbox community about, because I mean, well, Scapple is an homage to the tinderbox map, and deliberately designed to be simpler because it's, you know, one level. But and also I just find it really interesting you showing that sort of writing, because that's something we're not taught to do. But that is writing. That screen you showed us, there was a lot of structured thought in there. And what's really interesting, fascinating about it is it wasn't driven primarily by, you know, having to be a linear outline. You put the things, you create a relation, and sometimes there's a spatial relation, and sometimes there isn't, because that's something which sort of the hard edge of spatial hypertext gets wrong slightly. It's not about X, Y. It's about this human thing. We're saying, all right, these things are more like those things. You know, they're over here.
Yes.
They're different to those. I don't know why, but I just know they need to be separate. And this sort of thing, you know, allowing ourselves to do this, and that's, you know, Scapple's very nice in that, and I know it's also its relationship to Scrivener, is very interesting, and it does seem a very fruitful space in which to start to pull out some of these associations that you're referring to. Because I really like this idea, you know, that, I mean, yes, described in the figurative sense of sort of turning something round. But you're absolutely, I totally agree with you. I mean, when I look at graph things at the moment, they're wonderful, but a lot of them basically seem to have dropped out the back end of social network analysis. And you know, the thing is just, it's not about making sexy pictures with lots of lines. It's as much saying, why is there a blank here, or why are these things not connected?
Yeah. So
as much as it is, why are they connected?
Two things that really fall out of this is one of them is addressing, like you talked about Scapple being just one level. You need to be able to link one of these things to another one. And you need to be able to determine how much is shown, obviously. That is really, really important. But I think that the really, really most important thing, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but that is the interactivity. That has to be above visualization, because, you know, visual stuff is messy. When I was at the celebrating Festschrift is what they call it. I don't pronounce it right. For Ted Nelson, somewhere in California. In my presentations, I had a picture of a tree, close-up picture of the leaves of a tree. And I said, this makes no sense. And then the next slide, it was moving back and forth, and instantly you could see the structure. That was just my crude way of saying Ted's ideas of hypertextual freedom is what matters. You know, and you know, Raphael, you were talking about looking at the foundations again. Yeah, I mean, it can be done. I mean, yeah. Sorry, it literally could go on forever.
There's an interesting point about addressability, thinking back to, again, to the thing Alan just showed us, is So in a sense, yeah. So what would what given that that's just the thinking space that you've in a sense dropped out onto 2D spaces, so what bits in that need to be addressable? I mean, I don't know the answer to it, but I sort of think yes. So maybe that's part of one of our things here. We don't. It doesn't all need to be.
Mark, I have to jump into the swimming pool here. I would like to say very firmly assert that everything needs to be addressable and more. Because of
Sorry, not addressable. Right. Let me rephrase that. But not addressable at once.
No, but this is really, really important because it came up earlier, and I can't remember if you were there. Oh yeah, Alan, it's one of the first things you said. You should be able to address locations and states.
Yeah.
So you should be able, and also attributes, obviously, like a filter. So you should be able to address everything that's in a box, because I use boxes in a way. I want to see that and put that in something new. Or I want to be able to address everything that I've added on a Tuesday morning in itself. That needs to be addressable. Basically, any way that you could possibly choose to move the sculpture later needs to be addressable.
Sorry, that's what I meant, and it was in the sense when I was saying what needs to be done. It's there's a gap between let's throw everything in a data bucket and us having these really nuanced things, and a gap we all need to be working on is actually how we map the really nuanced parts to something short of just being this massive information that Raphael was saying earlier. You put everything in there. I think it was Raphael saying you put everything in there and you can't find it because it's too much.
Just for fun, I'm going to disagree with you strongly because in the book that you're helping me write, The History of Text, which for those who you don't know, we're basically taking the timeline from the previous book, making it just a huge timeline. I'm writing a brief intro about a small thing. There's a little paragraph that's relevant to this where I say there is no truth in text. Of course, there are lies in text, but there is no truth in text because text is always an interpretation. A photograph is a projection of something. Of course, photographs can lie, no question there. But a photograph is a projection. It is of a reality thing. Text is never that. It is always gone through a human mind. Forget the fact that it's AI written. It's still a human mind that came up with it at some point. So what I'm trying to say is, if you look at a photograph, and I'm a photographer with an art background, Shell School art, blah, blah, blah. When you take the picture, you don't actually know what the picture is. So I think that by having a lot of data in the data bucket, when we author stuff and when we interact, we don't actually know what is signal and what is noise until later.
100%. First of all, I'd love to get a recording of this if you are recording, but
we are actually today, yes.
Two quick comments. The addressing everything, I think, is where the trouble begins, or that is, of course, what we want. But the minute that you say you have to address everything, the next natural step is that everything must be an endpoint in and to itself. And so we already start to fall into the computer science mentality where everything must be precise. And going back to your, taking a photograph, I think that's an essential part of interactivity that is not addressed enough. Whenever we say interactivity, I think we tend to think of it in terms of retrieval and addressability in terms of retrieval.
Yes.
And then that assumes that we all have infinite time and can work through our spreadsheet and address everything.
Sorry, I'd like to see. Just a quick second. Raphael, did you want to say something before you have to go?
No, I was just going to what you mentioned on text not being the truth. There's this quote that I like, which is from what I think and what I say, there's a gap. From what I say to what you hear, there's another gap. From what you hear to what you thought about that, based on your experience, there's another gap. So there's a lot of difficulties related to text and speech and everything. But yeah, I'm gonna have to go, sorry. But I'll see everybody on Friday.
Look forward to it. See you later.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Yep, see you Friday.
But yeah, Alan, you were talking about the kind of weight of that, I think.
Yeah. So what is wonderful about applications is their interactivity and how they can suddenly change the rules in our head of something that seems impossible is suddenly possible and easy to do. We tend to, because we've been doing this forever, tend to think in the computer science mentality of precise points to interact with, when in fact it's a meaning to us may not be nearly as precise, right? So even though there is an address with a specific timestamp, that's not like the Bergson sense of duration, right? It just having an event that is 30 minutes long, in your head, you could be dreading it for a week. And so that's a much bigger piece of time, even though its actual moment is 30 minutes. Yeah. So this isn't quite a solution, but it maybe as an example, we'll bring something. I wonder if instead of, say in Rome, if we're all familiar with that, instead of entities, there were like little bags of words, the NLP idea of bag of words, where you just dump everything in and then a machine figures out its associations. Well, instead of big bags of words, we had lots of little bags of words that we could then weight through our usage. And that's an example of a fuzzy, like embracing fuzziness, as opposed, and I don't want it to be in opposition to addressability, but there's a relationship there where things need to be fuzzy for a time, or perhaps permanently fuzzy, and the hooks are addressable over time. Those become the hooks, like the acronym that someone always uses, right? That you can then manipulate. I agree that everything needs to be addressable, but that is the start of the slip into a mentality of
I think we need to define addressability as well.
yes.
And, World War II, one of the reasons I'm sitting in London, was, of course, the intelligence system for how to deal with aircrafts. And one of the aspects that we see in the movies, I'm sure you're all familiar with, but relevant to this conversation, is when you mark something on a map, you give it a color to indicate how fresh that information is. And after, it changes color, and then the people looking at it know that that's a bit out of date. So to attach some kind of fuzziness value, maybe even literally, like you write down a grand glossary entry, but you're still working on it. I know this is a super crude version of what you're saying, but even just to check off saying, I don't know.
Right. I think that would be valid. Like, honestly, it would be great if there was, and maybe there could be, in addition to a question mark and an exclamation, I don't know, mark.
And I think we have homework for Friday.
Wonderful.
That would be interesting. So yeah, we have to finish. It's gone on for a while, but very happy that it went on.
Thanks for
Alan, we'll
extending
see
it.
you again.
Yes. Yes, I'd love to be a part of it more often whenever my schedule permits. I'll have to see if I can join on Friday.
It is super casual, so yeah. But yeah, maybe we should think about fuzziness a little bit. Peter is typing here.
I love that. The caveat would be something beyond selected text, and maybe this is another challenge. It sticks into fuzzy, but text shouldn't just be the entity that is typed. It should be, in some cases, the acronym, the other ways it's referred to, the policies that are very attached to it, things that are almost seem totally synonymous with that text should be treated in a kind of a entity search as that. Anyway.
Okay, good point, big point. I agree with that. And this is one of the reasons I was for a while working on what we call the time browser project, where basically everything we did is recorded. It's been done 1 billion times, at least theoretically. Where the reason for that would be, organizing information takes more energy than creating information. So what you're talking about there is very worthwhile, but within specific domains. So I could imagine going back and looking at something Günther wrote last December and doing searches on some of the terminology he used, but based on what definitions were then, right? Because these things may change, or somehow being notified that his glossary definition for this has changed.
Yes.
Right, so there are many ways to
Absolutely.
approach this. So, but, you know, we have to have the infrastructures and the mechanism to do so. Right, on that vague note, I'm gonna have to go down and turn the oven on. Good to see you all,
Friday.
and hope to see you on Friday. Please also try to post a little bit in our community to make it all very active and so on, the community.circle thing.
Oh,
Are you not in there, Alan?
I did sign up for it, and I just forgot about Circle. There's so many things everywhere floating around.
That's the
I
problem.
would love to jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, put something, that would be good. Okay, see you on Friday, guys. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right.